Moving on to our big story now, Germany is officially witnessing its second wave of coronavirus. The number of new infections are surging, shattering the previous record rise of cases in May. For the last 3 days, Germany has been recording its highest number of coronavirus cases. Over 1,000 new infections are being reported daily. Till date, over 9,000 fatalities have been reported. The German Foreign Ministry has imposed a partial travel warning in Madrid and Basque amid rising infections. Now, warnings were already in place for the regions of Aragon and Catalonia and Navarra. According to a study, people in Germany have become more positive about social cohesion than they had been before the COVID-19 crisis struck the country. The study also found that Germans have increasingly started caring about their fellow human beings. Furthermore, trust in the German government has increased significantly compared to pre-COVID-19 levels. Now, for more on this, we have with us DW correspondent Chelsea Dulani joining us live from Berlin. Thank you so much for joining us. My first question to you is, the number of infections in Germany is rising at the highest pace since May. Germany has reported more than 1,000 new cases nearly every day this week. What is the government planning to do about this?
Well, this is certainly a major concern for both the German government, which had gotten so much praise for controlling the virus back in April and May, but also, of course, for businesses, for citizens. Everyone is extremely concerned about this recent rise in cases. What they plan to do, it's still a bit up in the air. So there's been a lot of concern about a potential second lockdown. That's obviously a big point of conversation, but the government really doesn't want to have to pull that lever at this point. That would be obviously really devastating for the German economy and for many people if we do have to implement another strict lockdown, another nationwide restriction on movement. What they are focusing on now is really what they had been focusing on for quite a while, which is increasing the number of tests they're doing and really tracing and locating the people who are infected. So we're seeing the country have about a testing capacity of about 1 million a week. So they are really ramping up testing for in particular, people coming back from abroad, so people coming back from vacation. Now there are tests available in all of the German airports, and they're also really hoping to ramp up testing for schools as well, as people return to schools over the past couple of weeks. But Germany does have a very high testing capacity. They have a strong system to trace infections in place. But even with this, they are coming up against constraints about how many people they can realistically test and trace at this point, because many states, many local governments only have so many people working on this right now. So there is certainly a need for more money and more investment in testing and tracing.
Okay, my next question to you actually is, has coronavirus actually brought Germans closer together? A survey released by Bertelsmann Foundation this week showed that Germans have actually grown more confident in society and their government since the onset of the pandemic. Why is that?
This is maybe a bit surprising for many people to see that many Germans do feel a stronger sense of solidarity now, but that's exactly what this survey showed. You mentioned before, but many Germans are now a lot more confident in the government. That's probably in part because the government was seen as doing a pretty good job in controlling the virus. But people also just had a stronger sense of solidarity with other Germans. So we saw the number of people who felt like people in society care about each other. That rose quite significantly over the past several months. But this really is really only applicable to part of society. So people with good jobs, yes, people who have a strong social network here, they really did see a stronger sense of solidarity throughout this. But this is only part of society that really felt this stronger cohesion throughout the crisis.
I was actually going to come to that next. Of course, not everyone has done well during this pandemic. There have also been warnings that the pandemic could actually make social divisions worse for those who were already disadvantaged. How have they fared all throughout this pandemic?
It's certainly been much more difficult for people who were already facing economic or social challenges here, as is the case for most of the world. So on the economic side, many people who didn't have full-time jobs, who were working part-time, who were self-employed, and people who have lower education, those were really the first people to be laid off. Those are people who are struggling a lot more financially right now. So definitely people who were already low income or struggling financially, they've been hit much harder. But this is also the case for people who live alone, people who are potentially single parents, and also in particular here, people with migrant backgrounds have had a much more difficult time throughout the pandemic. So one of the biggest areas that we've seen hit is the people working in places like slaughterhouses and on farms here in Germany. Many of those people were working under really difficult conditions. They were living in very bad housing, and that's where we've seen a lot of cases pop up. So certainly different populations are getting hit harder here, and that's likely going to just make these imbalances, make these inequalities that we have had in society even more entrenched going forward.
Of course. Chelsea, thank you so much for joining us with all those updates.